Education College, Imtiaz and Yvonne, and they're hopefully going to give us some insight onto refugee students as well as the SEND strategies. And then to finish us off, we have Jo from Hackney Education, and she will be talking about the SEND strategy with a specific insight into the green and white papers that have been put out recently. As you hopefully have just noticed, we are recording the meeting. I hope that's okay with everybody. If you have any issues, please feel free to turn off your screens if you don't want to be in the recording. And with that, Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind unpresenting so that Karen can join in, and I will hand over to Karen McGuigan to do the first of our sessions. So we're generally running 20 minutes speaking, and then there will be time at the end for Q&A. We will monitor the questions. Please feel free to put any questions into the chat, or you can save them for the end of the talk and ask them at the end. Karen, are you good to go?
Must unmute myself. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Excellent. So I'm Karen McGuigan. I'm founder and author of the Maths for Life programme, and I'm going to be speaking to you today about maths. I love this quote: good numeracy is the best protection against unemployment, low wages and poor health. And that's Andreas, who basically, the OECD, that is what they claim, and these are statistics that are based throughout the world, and it's known. So I'm going to start with, as you would imagine, some numbers. Shocking numbers. 1.4 million pupils in England have a special educational need. That's from the government statistics in 2020-21. Almost 180,000 had to resit a GCSE maths in 2019. Of these, only 22.3% achieved a standard pass, that's a grade 4 or above. I'll work out the maths for you. That means then 140,000 students failed a second time. And that's only the students who actually sat the GCSE maths. There's obviously another body of children and students within that who didn't actually sit the GCSE maths at 16. 6% of adults with a learning difficulty known to their local authority in England are in paid work. 6% of adults. That's against a 74% for the general population. Pretty shocking. So the national curriculum for maths, it's actually only designed to achieve a GCSE in maths. That's it. The curriculum is broken down and the syllabus is set year on year to achieve a GCSE. There's nothing between early years and GCSE with regard to benchmarking in maths, and that is it. I liken this to a skyscraper because the maths needed for GCSE maths is, in most occasions, the hardest maths that anyone, or the hardest examination that most adults will claim they've done in their lives. It is a skyscraper. It is layered. You need to grasp quite a lot of concepts to pass a GCSE in maths. But like this skyscraper, the structure of it has allowed children to take the lift between layers and not truly understand. So I liken it to the fact that they can skip up through layers by taking the lift and not actually secure layers by walking up the stairs. We actually know as adults, because we live it day in, day out, that the maths needed for your everyday life is much smaller than the national curriculum syllabus for GCSE maths. And for me, I've always likened it to my 2-story stroke 3-story with a potential to extend solid building. That's the maths that you truly need for life. That's the maths that you need to operate day in, day out. And for me, that is the most important thing to achieve when it comes to educating children with SEN. So what is wrong with the current? Okay, I'm going to summarize it, but it's not inclusive. So the current maths curriculum is not inclusive. It is a one-size-fits-all. And unlike most other subjects, it is very difficult to make it inclusive in the structure that it currently is, because although there's loads of different ways of teaching, the actual syllabus and curriculum means that there isn't enough time in the kind of the task to be able to make it as inclusive as possible. quite a lot of the methods, and when I say methods, there's a difference between a method and memory and memorization, rote learning, than there is in understanding. But quite a lot of the methods taught are methods and use long-term, short-term, and working memory. We know without doubt this is one of the biggest deficits that we have across the SEND community. It can be any combination or all of those. It might be attention deficit. It might well be because of the phonological loop. Our working memory is quite difficult. So we have this deficit, and therefore, because of the methods and the techniques used and what is required to build that maths curriculum, we understand that it is not inclusive because it requires these elements, which we know children with SEN have. Ironically, because of the Progress 8 score, functional skills is not included as the progress is one of the tick boxes on Progress 8. So in most schools' cases, and I love to be proved wrong in this, but in most schools' cases, you have to fail a GCSE before you're offered an alternative path. In some unusual funding situations, you have to fail it twice before you actually get an opportunity to get funded for a functional skill at further educational college. There's little or no training for teaching staff on how to differentiate maths. This is not a slight on any teaching community in any way, shape or form, because to differentiate maths, as I find out, is a skill in itself, because you have to have huge confidence in your maths, but also quite often you have to break it down and see it from the eyes of the child or the student with SEN, which is quite difficult to do if you've not got lived experience or total understanding of it. So I can look at books that are on my shelf that are written for mainstream, and I can pull out examples of it where I can see the questions just aren't suitable for children with autism. They're just not suitable for children with ADHD. You can actually see how they're written, and they're not really thought through for the inclusive education. But it also means that taking apart maths and trying to break it down without instruction is quite difficult. And my favorite, the current curriculum is just not relevant and up to date with life today. Life has moved immeasurably, and it's not playing catch up. And unfortunately, it will always be the case because things take a lot of time to change. This is my favorite slide to show for how out of date it is, but it still makes me angry, frustrated, kind of gigglish that we still teach in year 1 to check your change from 50p. And we still see worksheets where you can get a games controller for 20p. We wonder why children write their Christmas card or their Christmas wish list and it's so extensive. It's because the first exposure to value is completely warped. We know that the world doesn't work like that today. And we also know that because of COVID, things have accelerated forward and we are using money, currency, a lot less. This is the world we live in today. Yeah, electronic transfer, we go beep. Yes. The question is no longer how much change do I get? It should be, have I got enough money? We need to understand the value of goods because we're not transacting in cash. We need to understand the value proposition. My son, and I'm sure most of you who are representing secondary educations will know that most things are paid for by a finger these days or a card. But there is that sense of still we need to teach money, but we need to teach it in a different way that's more relevant to today and what our children are faced with. I'm putting this slide up. What does it cost an apple? Because I went live into a secondary school class in Glasgow at the start of February. I was speaking to the teacher. She needed an invigoration in her class and I offered to do it. It was a lower set maths class with about 15 students, 14, 15-year-olds in the class. And I asked the question, I held up an apple and then I held up 50p and £5. And I asked the question, how much does the apple cost? And they voted. Would it shock you to know that more than 2/3 of the class thought that an apple cost £5? So it doesn't really matter about working out the change you'd get from £5 if you've got no idea what the value of the item is. So that is where I'm spinning the kind of thought process on the fact that we need to teach relevant maths today. So why is the transition to Key Stage 3 a challenge? So I understand that most of you, and this focus is on Key Stage 5 and Post-16, but actually we have identified, and one of the reasons that in lockdown, quite a lot of the noise came from the SEND community is because we have this disparity and we have this transition. So we see it in the transition to Key Stage 3, but we also saw it in lockdown between school and parent. But the truth is, maths is built on knowing and adding and knowing and adding, which means students with SEN are working on a path that is actually a gradient less than the neurotypical. They're never going to play catch up. And this idea of intervention to catch up and then moving on is quite difficult with quite a lot of the students. They will continue to grow, but it will be on its own path. But that gap widens every year, which means in early years foundation stage, they are the closest to their peers. By the time they leave primary school in Key Stage 2, they are quite different to where their peers are. And that means that moving into Key Stage 3, the gap is already there and it will continue to widen. The scaffolding provider changes. I love this expression scaffolding because it truly explains what I mean by this. But most children moving through Key Stage 2 are in primary school. A lot of them will have education, health and care plans. They may indeed have one-to-one TAs, which means their scaffolding provider changes. So what they're used to and how much provision and how much help they're getting will change when they move into secondary school. The structure changes. I've put the Maths for Life hierarchy of independence key up here because this has been a revelation in trying to understand and unpick exactly what scaffolding is being provided. So we've created a scale for TAs to be able to demonstrate and understand, oh, okay, so the child knows how to do this, but actually only with lots of direct prompts from me. Okay, so they're on the direct prompt scale. What we need to do is move to indirect prompts. So the idea that when you transition from one provider to the next, the scaffolding changes. And that means that the student, although at the end of Key Stage 2, it might be said they could do this, this, and this. When you change the scaffolding provider, you might see that they can't, because what we haven't articulated is how much help they're actually being provided to do it. I'll give you an example that's not maths, but it's real life. My son, who is 10, has got in his EHCP that he can dress himself. And I go, technically, we'll tick that box, but technically speaking, he can't because he's scaffolded by me. The clothes that I buy him are oversized and stretchy. Yep, he has got the socks that aren't the cheapo ones from Marks and Spencer's. He's got bamboo ones which stretch out easily, but then concertina back so they don't fall off. He can only dress himself if his clothes are selected for the appropriateness of outside or what he's doing. They have to be orientated in the right way. So if you think about it, I am his scaffolding provider. If I give him to another parent, they don't know how much scaffolding I give him. So when they say, go dress yourself, and he stands there looking at them, it's because the scaffolding provider has changed. Hopefully I've explained that and it makes sense when you describe it like that. The starting point is already out of reach. If you look at the Key Stage 3 curriculum in maths, the starting point is out of reach of most of the children with SEN who are coming through, partly because at the end of Key Stage 2, you have effectively got all the maths that you need for life. Thereafter, it's adding complexity on top. So if you think about the starting point in the algebra sense, this is actually an example of a year 6 question. So it's already at the level where most children with SEN would be having difficulty. And when you move to Key Stage 3 and indeed a secondary, you start having difficulty getting age-appropriate resources and maths aids. What I mean by that is, in a primary school, you can always work to infants, walk down to infants, grab some worksheets. You can always grab the Numicon box from an early years. They have the kind of the setup. You can ask advice from a year 1 teacher who's used to doing this and teaching it in different ways to actually give some examples and help. But when you move to Key Stage 3, you're in a different area because you don't have a pool of teaching resources from primary school to pull on. And the age appropriateness is key because increasingly schools in secondary school who are talking to me are saying, the children are losing motivation because of the fact that they're being handed year 1 and year 2 labeled maths to do. The example there of the Parrot edition, it's no longer age appropriate to do that. They want to be working at that maths, but they need to have it relevant to them. In most cases, they've already lost the love of maths. And once you lose the love of maths, it's very hard to bring it back. And And this is something that breaks my heart, because quite a lot of the maths in the early years foundation stage and key stage 1 is some of the most exciting stuff that they will do. And you find a lot of children love maths at that stage, but there is a point at which where children fall out of love with maths, and children with SEN, that is hugely important. And when you don't love something, it's very difficult to engage with it. I have to thank my eldest son, Dexter. He posed for this photograph yesterday for me, and he actually looked at it and said, please don't put that in. And I said, I need to, but I'll take it out tomorrow. But what's in it for me? This is a classic one where, as the children get older, they question, what's in it for me? Why am I learning this? What relevance is this? And you can see as the maths gets more difficult, x plus y equals 6, you kind of go, what relevance has that got in my life? So they start to question in that classic teenager way, what's in it for me? And if they can't see what's in it for them, they've got no motivation. And that is true for every adult out there. If there's not a reason to do it, we always, we'll question, but we're motivated for a purpose. And that is the exact same thing when we move into secondary school. So what should we do in the ideal world? In the ideal world, I believe there should be accountability and a duty of care that basically every student leaving school has the minimum level of math skills they need for today's life. I believe that it is more important to do simple maths done well and independently than it is to have that skyscraper effect where you've got pockets of maths at various different levels. An example of that is a 15-year-old with SEN I've spoken to who can work out the missing angles round a point and in a triangle, but doesn't know the days of the week in order. Again, my priorities would be simple maths done well and independently. Once you get that, you can build. I believe there needs to be a recognised alternative path, not let's fail GCSE and then let's do something, because actually in that 14 years precursor, or the 12 years precursor to doing a GCSE, we've got 12 years of learning that we can be working towards an alternative pathway and actually putting that learning and indeed keeping that enthusiasm for maths going. And I really want us to think about what exists today in today's world to enable them. If anyone out there thinks you shouldn't use a calculator for maths, please see me offline, because I will challenge any adult here who has a mobile phone to say that they've never used it to do maths and a calculator app on their mobile phone. Technology is here to stay. It's here to assist us. Yet we no longer need to work out multi-simultaneous equations because computers do it for us. What we need to understand is what we're inputting in. So the understanding is more important than the ability to do the methodology, because technology can do methodology. I asked the question, how long would it take? But this has to be in context. I said, how long will what take? Well, how long would it take to change the curriculum if I set about it today? And I did some research because I thought it's really important to understand this type of thing. I don't expect you to read the next slide. I just want you to see the top number and the bottom number. But the last time the national curriculum was changed, it was as a precedent set by Michael Gove, from a commissioned report to implementation took 5 years. Okay, and that's with a motivation to do something. Okay, so 5 years from a commissioned report to implementation of change is what we're looking at. So I've alluded to the fact that this is my son Lance. He's actually 10 years old. You can work out the maths. In 5 years' time, he'll actually be doing his GCSEs. Scary thought. In 5 years' time, a change in the curriculum will be too late for him. So he needs something today. And that is exactly why the Maths for Life, a differentiated approach, was developed. I've developed it for him. So it's inspired by Lance. Selfishly, I've been differentiating his maths as he started school. In fact, before then, I was doing his early intervention as well with OT and speech and language. But he has inspired it. This is what has inspired me to do this. The Maths for Life program, I defined it when I sat down to do it, and it hasn't changed. It's a program that provides a differentiated approach to the maths curriculum. It lays down solid foundations, it's framed in practical understanding, and it delivers the essential maths needed for life. It has opened up the world of maths to a range of learners for whom the national curriculum, timescale and structure just doesn't work. You will see there that the majority of those photographs, in fact, I think all but one of them, are children with Down syndrome and students with Down syndrome. But this is interesting. It's because of the fact that the Down syndrome community have jumped upon this program and gone, oh my, this works for our children. But clearly, if we're looking at a program that works for children and students with Down syndrome, we are looking at a program that will work for quite a majority of the students. And you may be asking, but I've never heard of Maths for Life. And I'm going to say to you, that doesn't surprise me, because I have come out of nowhere. And I just want to show you this timeline to kind of say, you know, in 2018, I was in a local school teaching parents how maths was taught today so they could teach their children. That's what the Maths Mum was about. It was a mum who loves maths. But it was actually in lockdown when I started putting videos of me doing me and Lance doing maths online, when people started following me and going, you know what you're doing, could you please help? And that really snowballed a project that was in the back burner to the forefront, with parents basically saying, can you please write all this down? We need to follow a path, you know the pathway. And that's exactly what I did. In lockdown, while educating my 3 boys at home, I managed to pull together the Maths for Life, a differentiated approach book 1, and that was published in the August of 2020. And it has indeed rolled from there. We now have a full subscription service. We have done a pilot with Down Syndrome Oxford for a year. We've just published the results of that. And I'm now working with 3 different universities on some of the research that I'm doing. I've spoken at the Down Syndrome Research International Forum with regard to the mathematical gaps for children with Down syndrome. I've spoken at the Westminster Education Forum, which indeed Wendy was at. And, you know, I'm so pleased that just literally this week, if you open up your SEND magazine, I've got an article in there, as well as the fact that I'm presenting at NASN Live in July. So things are moving forward and my voice is being heard. But I'm a person who's a doer. So it's all about doing. And I don't just provide. What I'm trying to do is also gain research and actually understand more. The Maths for Life program is a constant moving feat that's developing as we learn more information. And that might be more information about a specific type of SEN, or it might be more information about trends. And Project Baseline is helping us understand that. So Project Baseline is freely available to everyone to use. It's on my website. It's a set of baseline assessments whereby you can use the hierarchy of independence. You can go through, you will find out so much more about what the student actually knows, not just the assistant or the scaffolding, but the idea is what the student knows. It will help you set up gap analysis. It will help you set up a path. But Project Baseline is available to everyone to actually do. And what Project Baseline is doing is it's giving us data on attainment, and this is true attainment and understanding. And we're starting to see trends. For instance, with the students with Down syndrome, we have had over 130 responses. We're now seeing the fact that there's accelerated growth and attainment through Key Stage 1 and into Key Stage 2. And then as soon as they hit Key Stage 3, it very much plateaus. Very little development happens after that attainment happens. And that's because we believe there isn't a path to work on, which we are changing. We're allowing this is also allowing us to analyze by specific topic, and it's not at the high level that you're used to. It is at an incremental level. So this is broken down and we start to see trends. We start to see where the weaknesses are. Once we identify a weakness, if we work on that weakness, we know that we can improve it, because obviously knowledge is power. The more knowledge we have, the more we can create a pathway that works for these children. And things that we find out, identifying areas of weakness, and this is key. So biggest one, conservation of number. It's not currently on any curriculum because it's a mathematical milestone. It's a development milestone. But yet we're recognizing that quite a lot of children with SEND find it really difficult to see the answer to this question. And that is truly a kind of conservation of number. It's something that's meant to be checked in year 1, but most teachers, and I'm going to say this honestly, if you're wondering what it is, you're not alone. The amount of times I've demonstrated conservation of number to teachers, in primary school is unbelievable, or indeed in secondary school. It's because it's not in a curriculum, but it is a milestone, and it's the understanding that if I've got 5 objects in a line close together and I expand them, just move them, that now, even though they take up more space, because I haven't added any or taken any away, I indeed have the same amount. Now, accepting that and understanding that is key to accepting that maths is not magical. Okay, so if you're in any doubt, and if you have students, no matter how old they are, I suggest you check this, because this could be the root of the reason quite a lot of misunderstanding is there. And also, I'm working on a program at the moment to investigate whether or not we can teach it. If it's something that we teach regularly and we demonstrate regularly, is it something that we can secure? Okay, we've also identified that things like ordinal numbers is a weakness, value is a weakness, not telling the time, but time passing is a weakness. And let's talk about telling the time, controversially. Picture this scene, Lance and Ella, his best friend, at the train station. Ella asks, "What time is it, Lance?" 20 to 10, Ella, because he looks at the analog clock on the platform. "What time does the train leave?" 9:45, because he looks at the digital departures board. 20:45. "I think we have 25 minutes before the train leaves." Excellent. Time to go grab a coffee. Let's change one thing. "Lance, what time is it?" He looks at the analog clock, but he reads it in digital and he goes, 9:40, Ella. "What time does the train leave?" 9:45. 40:45. "We've only got 5 minutes before the train leaves. Let's get to the platform." So this is one of the things we advocate, is strip out analog time and just teach reading an analog clock in digital. Using visual matching, using a numerical number line, we build up the pieces to be able to teach this. We're also measuring impact over time, and these are the results, just to show you that's age in months across the board. So that's up to 18, which is why it's key. The program is working from 4 to 27 at the moment. We've got students as old as 27 on it. Because it's age neutral, it is accessible to all students. We're seeing the results. This is a graph where we're seeing results in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, the green graph being the one where our children have been on the program for 12 months, a parent-led program, and you can start to see the difference in the accelerated learning. So the takeaways from this, because I'm realizing I'm slightly over time, the current one-size-fits-all doesn't work. It's not delivering independent, employable adults. The world is changing faster than governments can. I think we all agree that. Students with SEND need a solution today, and with the best will in the world, unless somebody else is going to do it, the Maths for Life is trying to fill that gap, and we're doing it because of need. So it is there, the need is there, and we are filling the gap. And, you know, a key member of the education department said to me when I was investigating doing this, development which is driven by personal desire, framed by inspiration, and delivers something life-changing is never a bad thing. And I think that's where I come from. I am delivering something life-changing to the students that are currently on it. Thank you so much. That's my presentation over. I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the meeting. Hopefully you can see me again.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you, much appreciated. Just want to open the floor up to any questions. So you can either raise your hand or drop a message in the chat.
I've stunned everyone into silence.
Okay, Joe, Margaret.
Oh, yes, it sounds like an amazing program. I just wondered whether it would be of value to just mainstream students as well to be doing that alongside the curriculum.
So interestingly, the schools that have been adopted, the early adopters of it, and it's largely gone in with a child with Down syndrome because it's come in through the Down syndrome community, they're rolling it out to mainstream. So I've got schools who are using it as a year 3 intervention. I have one school in Wales who's decided to take it on as their early years and Key Stage 1 curriculum. And it's like, because they can go off piste. I think it's up to the schools. There's nothing rocket science about it. It just breaks it all into all of the building blocks and you see it broken down. Whereas, you know, when we see something like counting to 10 as a one line, you know, that is broken down into 15 different stages. So it really does break it down to the minutiae, and it tries to identify where the gap is. So yeah, it is being rolled out for mainstream, but clearly I've always said this, if it works for children with Down syndrome, you know, you kind of go, I've picked the hardest audience to work with. So if it works for them, surely it could work for everyone. So start at the bottom and work your way up.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I'm just going to throw in there, you talked about alternative pathways, and I remember when I was head of maths a little while ago, there were some courses out there. There was a fantastic freestanding maths qualification called Money Management, which I used to do as a pre-run for the GCSE, but they've got rid of all of those courses now. They've all disappeared, which is such a shame.
And you know, my pushback is to government, because progress is how most of the schools measure their kind of things. And if we don't have courses on there that add towards this, what is the motivation for schools to do it? So it is definitely, we need. And money management is a classic one. I'm running a money workshop in a couple of weeks that I've done for, and it's an interactive with, normally with a TA or parent and the student, and that really does take you through the different approach to money, because you know, we need a better understanding when it comes to what we're actually teaching our kids and what's relevant. And you know, somebody said to me, well, my 19-year-old's still stuck on identifying coins, and I'm like, just ditch that, let's just go to notes. Let's, you know, because actually what's relevant now is I could spend 10 years trying to teach coin recognition, but it's not relevant. It's just not right. So pick out what's relevant and move forward.
Jo.
Hi, thanks, Karen. That was an amazing presentation, and yeah, I agree. It looks like a fantastic programme. I just was wondering if you could say a bit more about the way you assess, because I think I saw on one of your slides about your tracking progress in terms of age, and it'd just be interesting to hear a bit more about how you do that.
So at the moment, the baseline assessment is very much a work in progress, but I have been receiving the results back, and I've been plugging them into my Excel spreadsheets, as it were, and we've got a monitoring system going. So those people who send me back the results on Project Baseline get sent at intervals another assessment to do. And so we're trying to figure this kind of process out. I've got a project at the moment to try and automate it, to make it much more user friendly. But with the best will in the world, I am self-funded. I have got, you know, this is when you kind of go, I bought the book on building macros. But we're working on it, and the idea behind it is I want to make a school ready package where you can actually do the assessment, plug in the results, and you'll generate a gap analysis report out the other side of it, and then you'll be able to track at intervals. So the reports that I use, they're broken down. Each question has a specific purpose, but they're all really colourful and very engaging, age neutral. And what I look at is the hierarchy as well as the understanding. So you get a true assessment of how much does this child actually know with help, and with what help and what level of help. And it allows us to set targets that are not just an attainment of understanding, but you can actually go, oh, they understand it, but no, we just need to make it independent. So let's raise the independence level and encourage them to do it on their own. So it is a work in progress. It was never set out to be a school package, but we are developing what that should be. But like everything else, we're getting there. Slow and steady, but we will adapt. And it's interesting because one of the schools I went to visit who have rolled it out for their mainstream children, they said, well, we'd like these reports for all of our children. And I went, I hadn't initially set up this Maths for Life to generate reports, but actually, if it's a need, this is how you do it. But then they actually said to me, we don't have the expertise that you think we have to be able to generate those reports. So that's when I took it back and said, okay, this is where we go. I have got the expertise. Let's try and automate this in a way that will work for other schools. So that's where we're at the moment. We hope to try and have a beta out by September. So watch this space.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Karen, so much for that. And I'm sure if there are any more questions, I'm going to ask if we can put them in the chat, because I'm conscious of time ticking along, and Gabriella is waiting to jump in next. So once again, thank you, Karen. Really, really interesting talk. Anya, do you want to introduce?
Yeah, thank you. We'll also be sharing all our speakers' contact details today at the end of the meeting, so we'll be sending them out to all attendees. Jonathan, could we get the slides there? And have we got Gabriella Toma here from Cardinal Pole? Okay, hi Gabriella. So we've got Gabriella here, who is the assistant head teacher and SENCO lead at Cardinal Pole School, and she'll be discussing how SEND needs can appear differently at Key Stage 5 and strategies for supporting Key Stage 5 students with SEND needs. So we've worked closely together in the past, and I know that Gabriella's got some really exciting strategies to share with us today. So thank you, Gabri.
Hi, be mindful that my connection is quite poor because I'm using my phone. Our school does not have Google. And I will need Jonathan to manage the slides. Nothing revolutionary. I will just remind you of some of the strategies, and nothing as structured as we just heard from Karen, which was absolutely amazing. And I'm so looking forward. I have so many questions, so expect an email from me because I teach maths. But what I want to do is to talk you through what is different between SEN students in secondary and SEN students in college and sixth form. And to do so, I want you to think, and one of you to volunteer and tell me, how do I, so if you have the questions, can you please tell me backwards how to photocopy a colored worksheet? How to photocopy a colored worksheet backwards. Any volunteers?
I would, but it's an awful long time since I've done any photocopying. I just so I'm going to pass.
Let's make it easy. How to make a cup of tea backwards.
Okay, I'll have a go.
Yeah, I was going to go there.
Oh, I'll let you, Anya, if you want. Cup of tea backwards. Stir, milk, water, tea bag, get a cup.
Brilliant. So I know it sounds foolish, but often when we give instructions to Key Stage 5 students, we start from assuming they understand. Once because of their age, and second because we are so passionate about our subject, we are so confident, we fully understand, and we think if they got here, they know as well. So it's a lot of assumption. Yes, they understand. It's not rocket science. They know how to make a cup of tea. Just put it backwards. It's the same with the content. So, sorry, Jonathan, if you could put the starter on. In general, if you are to talk about accessing learning, you need literacy. Yes, you need numeracy, and I'm an advocate for it. But even in numeracy, to be able to solve many of the problems, you will need a language, and you need to have the understanding of that language to then see the value and the concept behind it. So if you were to define literacy, it's quite, many people will give me parts of it. We'll talk about, you know, the vocabulary, the oracy, the writing, but won't give you the full definition of it. So there are elements that we always kind of miss, or because it's kind of part of our norm, what we do on day-to-day basis. But if someone comes and walks into your sixth form, what is there that tells them that you actually value and you are raising awareness of literacy needs at Key Stage 5? And without talking to any of you, I'm assuming you will have this place with subject-specific vocabulary, some of the Tier 3 vocabulary. I'm assuming there will be quite few posters, but not much of it, not a lot, that will show that we value, we know there is a need, and this is how we support. And this is what we did this year. We have designed a new way of exciting students about new words and building their Tier 2 and Tier 3 vocabulary, and designed a Word of the Week poster that they are taking ownership of. So they will, given the structure, given the framework, they know how to then look and design the poster and share it with their form. And then they are rewarded if they use it consistently, or at least in a one-off in a lesson. Sorry, it's hard when I can't control. If you could go to the next slide, please. Often kids, especially when they sit exams, they will say, oh, the things that they are teaching us and the things that they are assessing on us, they are so different. The questions we do in class are different than the questions we are asking in the exam. And it's not about the questions being different, it's about the language used in some of the questions. So if students are not familiar with, and the vocabulary is not, they are not confident enough with using that language and using it in answering questions, they are not able to answer and meet the criteria and get the full marks, and that's where they struggle. We have introduced to all sixth form teachers, and actually all across teaching staff, the new app. So if you have an iPad or on an iPhone, you can download it yourself, and all you need to do is just take a picture of the worksheet, the PowerPoint, whatever you plan to teach that class, and it will automatically give you the reading age that is aimed at, which will help you then adapt and your work so that you know that all kids can access, all students, especially those that are on the SEN register or those that you are aware that they have other needs. Sorry, next one. We have all around our sixth form the emotional wheel, and we use it in and have use the language around it as part of our curriculum planning. So especially for level 3 business and health and social care, the planning has been had incorporated the emotional literacy aspects of it. And this is because it's so helpful when it comes to health and social care, but also as a way, as an additional tool for students to be able to express their feelings, to reach out and ask for support. Because many of the year 12s, when they move, especially if they move school, or if they move from secondary to college and sixth form without an EHCP, so they are only on the SEN register as SEN support, they see that opportunity as a restart, as a new chance of not having the label, of not being singled out, of not being known as being different or struggling, and they will hide. So if you don't have the information from the previous school, or if you don't know the student and don't liaise with the SEN team, you won't be aware for quite a while. So it takes, I think it is important that from the beginning you are able to establish good working relationship with them, and you equip them with the language that they need, so that they know that they are safe and that they can actually reach out and ask for help. Sorry, next one. Another thing that we're using is the word walls. If you follow Cardinal Paul, you can see we have it on Instagram and we tweet about it. So words that they struggle, and all the words of the week, we have asked the students to find the pictures that are more relevant, to define that word, to make songs so they can rap about that word, words that they find difficult in general. So there were students that did not know at Key Stage 5 what elucidate means, and they could not explain it, they could not use it. So this is how we started. We asked them a bank of words, identify those words that you are not sure what they mean without Googling or without using a dictionary, and that's how we started. And then they came with the words week on week. One of the example that you have there is about conspicuous, and they made a rap about it just because the picture was already done in the example we given them. Next one. We have all our ideas, the literacy action plan, and everything that we do, all the CPD was in response to, yes, the effect of the pandemic, especially on SEN kids, but on students in general, and also in response to both DFE and EHE, I can't find the words, about interdisciplinarity and the taking ownership of the fact that we are all teachers of literacy. Doesn't matter what our subject expertise is, we are all teachers of literacy. It is our responsibility to include in our teacher talk, tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary, and to make sure that we are passionate about not only teaching our subject, but also about explaining what that word means, the new word that we introduce, how can it be in a different subject, and trying to work together and have a commonality of language so that students know how to expect and know how to spot it, and then they develop their own vocabulary. Next slide, sorry. And all this, the next 6 or 7 slides, they're just examples how you can introduce new vocabulary. Yes, this is babyish because we are talking about a child that will be neurotypical, or a child that will have complex needs, and they will need support in assimilating new words. And you can ask them to find a synonym, to find an antonym. You can ask them, how does it sound like? Draw a picture of it. So there are many strategies available that I'm sure you already know about, but the few that I included are those that we use at school, and they've been successful over time. So trying to find what group it belongs to, what is the use, how does it look in action, what are some of the properties, things that will then be able to tap in and will help the child retrieve that word and use it confidently because they know exactly all its properties, all its characteristics. Next one. A word map, quite similar to what I was saying, is either the definition and then what is the meaning, but asking to take ownership of it and make a sentence with the meaning, a sentence of their own, and make sure that they draw a picture and find a synonym or an antonym. Sorry, next one. Some of the words that we have used were those on the right-hand side, and although they seem like they are easy words because they are most of them, if not all of them, tier 2 vocabulary words, some of the students struggle with. And we have reminded staff through CPD about some ways in which they can then teach the new words. We give them the tools and the templates for to help them with that. But it's about retrieval. We have a retrieval roulette, so things that they can tap in and just choose the word. What's the definition? Give me an example. How can you use it in a sentence? Questioning and trying to reward it so that they are prompted to the synonyms of those words, and everything that's listed there, and I cannot see on the phone. But consider that you are to teach the vocabulary that you expect the students to use, because not all of them, especially those students that have not had GCSEs in 2020 and now are near 12, those kids have so many gaps, and there are so many things that they are out of routine, out of ethic of working. Vocabulary was quite limited because they were in a online world where they just texted or chatted, and there was not much of development both on writing skills, academic writing, but also on vocabulary. Next one. So I think the next are all just ways of that I was talking about, how we supported teachers to think about and what they can use to weave in new strategies of supporting students developing their vocabulary and also their academic writing skills. Next one. And I can talk separately if there is any need about any of those. For when we introduced the tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary, we also looked at the command verbs, the bossy words that level 3 business or health and social care students will need to be able to then meet the criteria and to answer or to use in their assignments, so they can fully get what they want, the merit or the distinction. What happened was that some of the students and teachers as well were using the definitions from, depending on what exam board was used, be it AQA, Cambridge or NCFE, but there was no explanation behind it. It was again that assumption that, well, the definition is there, they understand what it is. So what we did for each command verb, we have given examples from different subjects, and those were for health and social care. You can slide, next one, sorry. And we used exam questions and then give them, this is the scenario, how would you explain the effect of fetal alcohol syndrome on that, and on intellectual development, highlighting the keywords, highlighting what criteria they should hit, what it means, and then working out, giving them the example. All these exam questions and examples given were actually reinforcing the need of modeling answers. So model. SEN students in particular need a lot of modeling, and it is the only way that they will be able then to be confident enough to to answer the questions themselves. Sorry, can you move the next slide? It's just example. So if you can scroll quite few through next 3 or 4, having prompts, having sentence starters, helping them, it helps if they have the success criteria on the side so they can refer back to, or if they have word banks that they can use for different types of questions, especially for case study. This is moving to tier 3 vocabulary. If we are thinking of subject-specific vocabulary, so scientific language, you can see that what we use in class is having the words there, prompting them so that they are encouraged to use them at the same time as being rewarded if they use it correctly, and that if they are able to then teach someone else, especially those students that are known to be on the SEN register. Next one. This is an example of using modeling, having 3 different levels of answers for the same question, helping students, especially SEN students, to see how is the first answer relating to the question, and why has only hit 2 marks. What is the next answer? Why is that 3 marks? And why is the third answer 5 marks? Have the success criteria on the side, highlight which answer was hitting what success criteria, and how can, so kind of decomposing the answer to see what was good and what was not good, and how can then they use that. So have the skills to answer their own questions and make sure that they meet the criteria and get the full marks. Next one. This is an excellent example from English. I'm working closely with one of the English teachers here, and what we used in one of the CPDs for school was a way of answering very common question, GCSE question. This is using 2 different sources to compare how the writers convey their different perspectives on feelings about their journey. So there's 4 different ways of answering, and 4 different ways of engaging students while ensuring that they meet the criteria and get the full marks, but also understand them and keep them with the skills that they will need to then answer similar questions, or questions that will have parts of similarity. Next slide. So there are 4 different ways. We use Venn diagrams, slow writing, highlighting, sentence stems. So the do now activity is the easy, just look at the source, analyze. Sorry, next one. Because the keyword is compare, if we look at the characteristics of, and I know it sounds and looks childish, especially if we are talking about Key Stage 5, but breaking it down, bringing it to a level where they are confident and they can take part and you get them to engage, it's securing the skill, and then you can move it to the source and to the actual level of writing that you need them to work at. But starting is very at the basic level gives them the confidence that they need to understand the skill. So looking at dolphins and fish in this example, what are the characteristics, what are different, what are the same, and then they have everything they need to write to compare the characteristics of dolphin and fish. The slow writing, if they have 2 different, so the next slide, sorry, if they have the 2 different answers, I don't know if it's moving.
Oh, I think we've lost your volume there, Gabby. Oh. We'll just wait for Gabrielle to join us back. Okay, what we might have to do because of time, hopefully Gabriella will be able to join us again shortly. But Jonathan, if we could move ahead to Imtiaz and Yvonne, so just on the PowerPoint there. Thank you very much. And also, if you do have any questions for Gabriella, please drop them into the chat. Hopefully she'll be back with us shortly, and we can pose those questions to her. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Okay, so next we've got Imtiaz and Yvonne from ELAT, who will be discussing how to support Key Stage 4 and 5 students with additional needs, including students who are refugee students at ELAT, and just sharing their experiences of how it's been post-pandemic, and especially with the crisis that we're seeing in the Ukraine. We know that this could actually, we could all be in a position where we're going to have to support refugee students moving forward. So I'm going to hand over to Imtiaz and Yvonne. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya, for such a brilliant introduction. My name is Yvonne, and Amy is going to be co-presenting with me. I'll talk more about the refugee students, and Amy will talk about the additional support to SEND students. Yeah. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. So our presentation is going to be in sort of briefed in the structure that I will talk about the students with support, things we've considered when giving the support to the students, and strategies we've used at ELAT. And then Amy will present, then we'll move it on to question and answer. So just to start with, quite a range definition of what could be deemed as a refugee or refugee students. So we have students who have full refugee status, students who have family reunion, those on humanitarian protection, asylum-seeking children, those who've come with parents or nuclear parents or extended family, those who've just come with their own siblings and they're living with their siblings within the country. We have those who are unaccompanied. Some of them are 16 to 18-year-olds and 19 plus. So by the look of the list, before we go to our next slide, if you could go back a little bit, yeah. By the look at the list that's provided, there are quite two distinct ways where we can divide our students with refugee backgrounds. We have those who have refugee status and those who are still seeking asylum seeking children. So when they're 16 to 18, there's no difference. They're all entitled to all the benefits and stuff and education and stuff. But when the asylum seeking children hit 19, the ball changes because they've started with us when they're 17, 18. The moment they're 19, they're deemed as adults. The support they were getting, whether it was from social services, whether it was from the Home Office, whether they're getting the national asylum or support, which is given by the Home Office, that sort of stops for some of them, but not all of them. So even their progression routes is affected by what they are entitled to. So next slide, please. So things to consider, we've considered when we're giving our support to our students. So we've treated everyone who's coming as if they've been exposed to a potentially traumatic event. So some of them might have developed post-traumatic stress disorder, not all, but some. But with the knowledge that this has a detrimental effect on learning, it could be refugee learning or any other learning. If someone has gone through a traumatic event, it really affects learning. So I'm also talking from experience because I'm of a refugee background, and I believe my children also came through, had these feelings because I also experienced those same feelings as well as an adult with children as well. So before coming to the UK, there's lots of fear. You'd have perhaps lost some, gone through bereavement because perhaps a close family of yours or somebody has passed away through, it could be war, it could be persecution, separation from family and friends. And let alone, it's only 2 years back that I've realized I actually left my pets without anything when I was when I left the country. It really affected me because now I've got a new pet. Sorry, my dog is just barking, might hear the background noise. Then I realized, I said, what happened to my pets? Because when you're in flight, you don't even think about those things. And it just hit me, say, what happened to my dogs? Because when I left the country, what happened to them? I have no clue up to now what happened to them because we're in flight. So deterioration of health, it could be physical punishment and torture and displacement within the country because you're moving from one place, trying to seek refuge in another place. So everything, like what I'm saying, you leave everything, you're going to another place to think that it's more safe. Then that's what happens. So the next slide, please. So experiences in the UK. So stress adjusting to a new community and culture, language barriers. It could be the reading part. The script is totally different. Loneliness, just missing family and friends and familiar environment. Could be going through hate crime, people just targeting you for no reason or even saying something which we have sort of, where is this coming from? Inadequate housing and homelessness. Identity changes as well because you don't really know where you're fitting or whether you're now losing your personal identity because you're going through these things. Navigating the system, it could be the legal system, the home office, because even as asylum seeking children, they still get batches and batches of letters. This is a bail letter. This is, you've got to come for this, you've got to come for that. So not really fully understanding what's actually the best way, the best route with the navigating the system. It could be the school education system, where to get support and stuff like that. Being in limbo for quite a long time for some students, they've waited for more than 8 or 9 years just to get their visas regularized or their stay regularized. Anxiety, not knowing what's next, and being moved from one place to the other without much notice. You've just been told when they go to the home office that in 2 days' time you're going to be moved, or somebody just comes, or you need to move in 3 days' time, you're going to go to this place. There's a van already waiting and they are being moved from one hotel to the next, or out of the borough or within the borough. So there's a lot of uncertainty where you're actually living, not having that fixed address and fixed abode. And attending appointments as well. So there's lots of appointments to attend. It could be the home office appointments, social worker appointments. Some of them have to go to medical appointments because it's needed for this and that. It could be also health related. So lots and lots of appointments. Next slide, please. This is just a generic picture. So symptoms that some people experience when they're going through a traumatic and stressful event. So avoid thinking of the trauma, avoid talking of the trauma, easily frightened, flashbacks, concentration levels quite affected, bad dreams, sleeping difficulties, aggressive behavior, loss of interest, feeling guilt or shame. So these are quite some of the, what people could be going through because of some exposure or actually experiencing a traumatic, a stressful event. Next slide, please. So what is the impact in the classroom of all this, like what we've talked about? It could, some, not all, because we don't have to generalize, because people are quite different with how they actually deal with situations. Tiredness, avoidance behavior, lateness and absence, low self-esteem, anxiety, panic attacks, lack of trust, and problems with interactions. Yeah. Next slide. So what should we do as practitioners? So creating safe places. So when you're creating safe places, not making sure that we give our students more like choices to opt out when they don't really want to contribute to things. At times it's more of an understanding, for example, like as teachers, when students come back from holiday, from things like that, or where have you been on holiday and stuff like that. So some, like, everyone will be contributing and saying where they've been on holiday. At times, like, people who are in these circumstances, that's the day they've been told they're going to move, or that they're going to be, especially for those who are still seeking asylum, or that they are going to be, they've been saved with deportation letters and stuff like that. So just being aware to say, give optional answers, or where have you been on holiday, or where would you like to go on holiday if you were to go on holiday? Just being aware when you're sort of asking those questions as practitioners in the classroom on how to give options so that everyone can contribute without being feeling like singled out to say or to repeat what a dreadful experience they've had in front of everyone. So just being aware as practitioners as that, and not putting people on the spot, and just more of telling them about confidentiality, that whatever they're doing and stuff, and setting boundaries and ground rules within that. And just reducing stressors as well. So more of understanding like reasons for lateness and stuff like that. Be more accommodating to say when somebody walks in class and stuff, or the registration is stopped, or why you're late again. So just not doing that, just having an understanding that there might be a possible reason. I believe that this person is like constantly comes in late because perhaps what we've noticed that some of the children might go to help their parents. It could be their sibling with interpretation and translation because their English is a way better than the families. So just having that, and at times they come in, they don't really want to tell everyone this is what's happening, and they just come in late. But we have those one-to-ones and conversations with them. And I think it's really, really important just to help the students setting out new life goals and making them see the possibilities, what the future holds, not always to be thinking about the traumatic events, but to say, we are here now, this is what you can do, and things like that. And also by doing that within the school, just to have perhaps speakers of refugee background who've done well, and so that they can see a positive light. It could be an event where somebody who's come from the background as well, and they can showcase how they've used the opportunity to come here and they've achieved. So more of models, role models and coaches for the students. And let's not generalize, like what I said, everyone is different, and treating everyone as an individual. And the most important thing is not to forget to self-care as a practitioner, because being taught all these stories, all these experiences, and really don't know what to do with them. So a lot of peer support, a lot of setting boundaries, working within your boundaries within your workplace, and referring and reflecting, and also having a buddy system where you can ask for support from other colleagues within your organizations. Next slide. So what we've done at ILAT, these are some of the stuff we've done at ILAT. So we've tried before the students actually start with us, meeting with the students and family before the course. They come this more like an orientation, individualized event where they come, have meetings with them. We show them around, we tell them, we give them opportunities. That's weeks before they even start with us. We have that prior before the induction session. We always allocate every student with a key worker who works with the family, and they have regular conversations with the students and regular meetings. Amy will tell you about that. So we've supported especially a lot of asylum seekers in the live in hotels, which is more like emergency accommodation. And they've come and reported that they didn't have, they haven't had a hot meal or breakfast whatsoever. So we've ended up providing breakfast and lunch for students because they've reported that they don't have a hot meal. We've provided travel expenses as well for students to come to ILAT, and resources such as books, data, mobile phones, and laptops. We've created sort of informal activities, more like digital activities, like digital clubs, for them to boost their digital skills, conversation clubs, just safe spaces to talk about anything they would like to talk. But within that, there's more of like, you know, some kind of learning embedded. It could be anything to do with prevent, with safeguarding, with things like that. Although it's done not in a classroom, it's more like outside the classroom as an activity. Although there's learning behind, an outcome behind there, but it's not fully explicit, but learning sort of happens and where that happens. So volunteering and work placement opportunities, mentoring, early intervention as much as possible, which is really, really needed. And we've done that. And regular training for staff and well-being service for all staff, like what I said, that's is really needed. We've also had, like what I was saying, that the students have been moved from one hotel to the next, or from Hackney, Tower Hamlets, and now they've been moved to Birmingham or Manchester within a notice. So we've actually supported them to look for new providers with the areas they've been moved. Next slide, please. So with progression advice when they finish with us, refugees, full refugees, humanitarian protection, and 16 to 18 when it comes to university and stuff like that is quite much the same because they're entitled to the same benefits and the same rules. But when it comes to people who are still seeking asylum, they are classified as overseas students, then unable to access student finance. Those with refugee status with limited leave to remain and discretionary leave to remain, then it all depends on the university, but they would like to see a minimum of 3 continuous living within the UK, or there are other rules which are called 7-year rule or half-life rule. If you've spent 7 years continuously within the UK from the age when you're under 16 up to where you are. So they have to live continuously for 7 or 10 years within the UK so they can be exempt from paying international fees when it comes to university. Indefinite leave to remain, sections in Kali leave, they're eligible for home fees. Refugee status and humanity, they're eligible for home fees and student finance. So these rules, they keep changing and stuff, but all I could say, like, you know, if you have to take something from this presentation, that our provision has to be trauma. We have to use trauma-informed strategies within our teaching course. That covers everything and support you could give to our refugee children, background children who will be supported in our provisions. So over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Yvonne. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. So Jonathan, could you move on to the next slide for me, please? Okay, so my name is Imtiaz. I'm the Life Skills Coordinator at ELAT, which is the 6th form. So just to add to what Yvonne was saying, talking about ELAT is a training provider, and we're based in Kingston Road in Hackney. We teach ESOL to adult students, and that's all off-site. Some of them are online. We also teach adult vocational classes, and they're online as well. But within ELAT on-site, we have a 6th form, which is 16 to 18-year-olds, but we also have plus 19 as well, students with EHCP. The majority of our students are SEN, and they've got ASD, speech and language difficulties, cognition and learning difficulties, anxiety, and social emotional mental health issues as well, and sometimes within that ADHD as well. So a lot of our learners, not only the SEN learners, in fact, the majority, in fact, all of them could not engage at school, or they just withdrew from school. So some of them have had no education for about 2 or 3 years. They've just been at home, they've been doing nothing. Even when some of them whilst they were at school, they did nothing. So they come to us with no qualifications, having done no qualifications. Maybe they might have sat a GCSE. I think, sorry, Karen was talking about that earlier. Some students are just given the GCSE, but it was not within their capabilities to say it. So they come with a lot of baggage, with a lot of issues. A lot of them have been referred to us by councils or by schools. Sometimes parents bring them themselves. other parents talk to them. So we're quite small. We only have 60 60 students, and within that we also have refugees or asylum-seeking children, and some of them are unaccompanied. Within that cohort as well, there are some SEN students, but it's very difficult to have a diagnosis for them because they're refugees, and as Yvonne mentioned, they might sometimes only be with us for a few months, so that's another difficulty. So the majority, again, they're 16 to 18, so it's more Key Stage 5. We have 19 plus as well, going up to age 24, who have EHCPs. So because of this, a lot of our teachers have to be really aware of teaching SEN students. And for me personally, I came from FE colleges, and I hadn't really taught SEN students apart from maybe 1 or 2 in some classes, so not this amount in a class. And for me, I've been here for about 3 years. It's been a steep learning curve. I absolutely love it. But it's been, I had to learn a lot very quickly, and maybe just think about our strategies that we use as well. So Jonathan, could you move to the next slide, please? And we're going to go over, a lot of you probably know this already, and with Gabriella and Karen, I think they've covered some of these already. These are some of the strategies that we use for our SEND learners. So first things first, we create a routine, and the routine is from their timetable. We don't try to change their timetables too often. Sometimes we have to. In terms of their daily routine as well, it always starts the same. They come in at 9:30, they finish at 4 or 12:30, depending on their timetable. They have the same breaks at the same time every day. We find it really throws our students if we don't stick to the routine. So they have 2 breaks in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and the lunchtime as well. And when we have external people coming in to speak to us learners, or we do workshops, we emphasize to them about keeping to the routine. So the breaks are really important for our learners. And again, I think it induces anxiety if they don't have that break. In terms of the routine, we greet our students every morning. In some cases, so for example, yesterday a student was feeling quite anxious, and there were some issues that were affecting him at home, and his parents came to speak to us. So what we do, we instigate something called check-ins. So every morning the student will come in and they check in with a named person. So it's usually myself or Shafiq, who's the other coordinator, or our 2 key workers. But it's not, it can be another teacher or even other staff as well. It's who they feel most comfortable with. But it's usually myself or Shafiq. So they check in with us, they let us know how they've been doing, how their night was, and how they're feeling in the morning. Within our check-in, we also make sure that the students have eaten breakfast, they're not thirsty, and that's before they go into class. So if they go into class and they're still hungry and they haven't eaten, the teachers are allowed to send them out. We have, as Yvonne mentioned, a breakfast club as well. So they go out and eat some food, because we find that if they don't eat anything, they just can't concentrate. And we try to avoid sugary foods as well. So that's really important for them. When they're in the classes have to start the same all the time. And we do this we sort of try to emphasize this with all the teachers in CPD. So it's constant reinforcement of, you open the door, the teacher has to be there, the TA has to be there, everything is set up for them. We use notebooks, so the notebooks are on the front table. The students come in and take their notebook, sit down, get a pen, get ready to learn. The teachers have to greet the students. I think a lot of teachers do this all the time, but we're trying to emphasize this, that please start the class the same routine. And even the sort of rhythm of the class, I certainly try to keep the same routine, and they're very used to the rhythm, so they know exactly what's going to happen at the end of the class as well. We usually finish off with reflections and a discussion. So it's the routine is very important for our students. Now, the other thing our students really like about ELA, and what they emphasize about what they want at ELA, is feeling safe. They just feel that they're amongst friends and the teachers are friendly, they feel safe, they don't feel threatened. So we take that very seriously. So we're very strict about who comes on site, who can speak to them, and just even outside ELA as well. So we're watching what's going on outside as well. And I'm sure this applies to all students, but particularly to our students. The students love that we listen to them, and we also act on what they say to us. So we have regular well-being surveys, but we also have discussions with them quite often. And I'll come to this later. We have key workers that talk to them as well. Our areas are meant to be quiet learning areas. Sometimes, it can get a bit noisy at lunch times as well and break times. But when they're in the class, it's meant to be a quiet learning area. So we try not to have too much noise around the building. And again, we limit the visual distractions as well. And this applies to the resources that the teachers use as well. We emphasize that they've got to be quite clear and simple for a lot of us SEN students as well. And one of the things that we all have to be wary of is being patient with our students, because I think a lot of them have come through backgrounds where maybe they haven't been listened to, or people haven't had patience with them. So this is really, really important. So all our staff it's emphasized with all our staff that you have to be patient with them. Okay, next slide, please, Jonathan. Thank you. Okay, so these are some of the other needs of our learners. A lot of issues with emotional regulation, and again, the check-ins come in. They're quite important, because if, for example, we have some students that are going through traumas at home life as well. They find it really hard to regulate their emotions, and we use check-ins, but we also have people from SALT working with them as well, and an educational psychologist, and we have an ELSA as well. A lot of students feel socially withdrawn when they come to us, and in some cases we've had students maybe for the first 6 months didn't really want to speak to anyone. They would sit by themselves, and we really encourage them to get involved in the classrooms. When they're outside in the open areas, if they're sitting having lunch, one of the teachers or TAs will join them as well, so they're never by themselves. So because we're so small, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, there's only 60 young learners with us, so we're quite small. We can actually give this attention to them all, and within each class there's a teacher and a TA as well. Sometimes we have volunteer TAs, and the classrooms are quite small. They're maximum 12 people, so that really helps. Again, a lot of our students find it difficult to deal with trauma, such as bereavement or family issues, and we have refugees as well, young refugees, so they've come through quite shocking experiences. When they find it difficult to deal with trauma, we have regular meetings with parents, we have meetings with the council as well, annual reviews. We try to source bereavement counsellors and emotional literacy counsellors. So we're always looking for that as well, and we're very proactive about finding something for them. And sometimes they just want to chat, and we're open for that as well. So we need to sometimes, if I'm in the office, I just need to drop everything and just go and speak to someone who's maybe having an issue. Again, low self-esteem, and this is all historical. It's traced back to what's been happening to them at school, and they come to us with very low self-esteem, and we build that, and I'm going to come to this later, through our personal social development program as well, and also through everyday interactions. Tiredness is a big issue, and they're teenagers, so sometimes they're tired because they're teenagers and they've been playing games all night, but they're also because of the emotions they've been going through, the issues they're going through at home as well. It leads to insomnia, the anxieties that they have. So that can be a major issue, and that goes back to the check-in in the morning. How are you feeling? And so yesterday we had a student who was feeling very tired because he hadn't slept for maybe 2-3 days. He's quite emotional because there's something going on in his life. So we took him out of class. We had one-to-one sessions with him, and he just couldn't function for the rest of the day. So we allowed him, and we can do this. We can allow them to go home as long as we inform the parents, and the parents are there, and then they can do the work there or to catch up later. So that was allowed because he just wasn't functioning in class, and there's no point in sitting in class and getting more stressed because he couldn't function. Avoidance behaviors, yeah, this can come from the lower self-esteem or social withdrawal, so they just don't want, don't want to engage in class. Again, over time, we can be quite pushy. We try to get people to engage, and we got to play this by ear sometimes as well. It's not, they're all different, and we just have to look at each person, see what works best for them. And the lateness and absence then again can come from fear of coming in, but that's very rare with most of our students that come to SEND. ELAT, they do like coming in, but then sometimes they can feel quite anxious about other things that's stopping them coming in, or they haven't slept, so they just don't come in the morning. So there's some of the issues that some of our learners have. They can be sometimes most of the learners as well. So Jonathan, could you move on to the next slide for me, please? Okay, so I've said that keeping to a routine, and I've sort of gone ahead, and we have clearly structured lessons. We have LOs on board, lesson plans that are clearly structured. Students really need to be a bit aware of what they're going to be doing for not only that lesson, but for the rest of the term. So no big surprises. Sometimes we can't help having, so for example, we might go on a trip or work placement, or we have an external person coming in. Anything like that, we tell the students way in advance. Any trips, we send letters home, we tell them by email, we'll keep reinforcing it in classroom as well. You're going to be doing this. So for example, 2 students went off to one of our external partners this morning. They were informed last week. They went with one of our TAs. So, and they asked actually, because we were trying to get them to be independent and go down to Liverpool Street, but they said, can we send someone with them? So we sent one of our TAs with them. And so this is really important that they're informed well in advance of any changes to their lessons or their week or even their timetable. So, and we know that they get really stressed, and sometimes the parents get very stressed if there's a change in the timetable as well. So it's we're in constant communication with parents, the students, and the social workers if they have social workers or care workers or key workers outside of ELAT. When in class, again, I think I don't need to say this to any teachers, the instructions have to be clear and brief, and the activities should be one-step activities rather than a lot of activities all at the same time. They can't really cope with this, so it's very important. So we do this in CPD. We say to teachers that the instructions have to be like this. The other thing, I think Gabriella touched on this, and it's about scaffolding and modeling. So a lot of scaffolding with our students. Well, in fact, this is where our TAs come in as well. It's very important. What we've been doing is running sessions with an educational psychologist and the TAs and the teachers on effective use of TAs within class, and the base of those sessions was scaffolding and how we scaffold a lesson for each student. And it was, what came out of this was that it's really important that the instructions at the beginning are very clear, and what we want to move away from is not more so it's clear instructions and modeling, constantly modeling. But once we've done that, we would like the students to become more independent over time. And it's what we found is that the TAs were working with the students and they liked working with the students, so they were helping them rather than supporting them, and the help, it was not allowing the students to become independent. So we needed to train ourselves to maybe step away from the student. If the student can demonstrate that they understand what the activity is and what they need to do, then we leave them to do it. And I think this has been really difficult for the teachers and TAs as well, because they feel they need to be constantly helping them, but no, actually they're not going to be learning anything if we're constantly there helping them or aiding them. So we do need to push the independence idea of it as well. But this can come about by well scaffolded lessons and modeling that's really effective. And again, clear and simple visual aids. A lot of our students like hands-on activities, and they like doing things. And actually, I forgot to mention, so Most of our courses, our vocational courses, are tech-based. We do computer software, computer engineering, and we do business admin, but we also do media and games design. So a lot of this is where they make things and they do things. We have 3D printers, and they love doing that. And actually this goes really well with a lot of our SEN students. They can get really into something and look into detail. They can work with something. We have one student who constantly likes taking things apart. In fact, he's always taking my computer apart as well. So these hands-on activities are really important for our students if we can do that, and we try to do it in maths and English as well. And we'd also like to encourage further exploration. So we have one student, even though he's doing a tech course, he really is interested in history, and my background is history as well, and puts me to shame in ancient history. So we've encouraged him to explore this further. He set up a history club with 3 other students. They're reading, or anything like that. Some of our students really like games, so we set up games clubs. So that moves into the game clubs as well. So that's really, really important. Okay, next slide, please, Jonathan. Okay, again, I think I mentioned already about listening. So we listen and act. Even though our students so anything the students mention, we try to act upon it. So if, for example, history club, we said, yeah, let's set that up. If they want to go on a trip and is really keen on something, we try to set those things up as well. So we do listen to them all the time, and we never promise them anything. You know, if we listen and see, we'll say if we can do it, because we found if you promise them and we can't do it, they become very disappointed and disillusioned as well. We have high expectations of our SEN students, so you know we're pushing them all the time to gain the qualifications and become more confident as well. As I mentioned already, all our staff here are here to help. So even though we have designated roles, every member of staff is there to help the students, and the students know all our staff, and we encourage all our staff to get to know the students. And this can mean sitting at lunchtime with them and having lunch as well. So myself and Shveek know all our students, and the TAs do, the key workers as well. We have 2 key workers, and they both work with each student, and they have one-to-ones with the students. They look after all their needs, so they're really important, we find as well, because students sometimes need someone to go to, and they fulfill a really important role. And sorry, go back to the classrooms. I forgot to mention that if our students check in and they say they're not, there's something that's troubling them or they're full of anxiety, what we allow is during the classrooms, and the teachers are informed of this, if things become overwhelming for them or they can't deal with something, they're allowed timeouts where they can go and talk to the key worker, the ELSA, or myself or Shafik as well. And we also employ, and ELSA is an emotional literacy support assistant, and we employ SALT. And as I mentioned already, we have an educational psychologist that comes and works with the teachers and the students as well. We find that really useful. Another thing we do is personal social development sessions where they can get a qualification, but the most important thing about these sessions is helping them build confidence and gain skills in communication, just teamwork as well. So they do things like community action, helping the homeless. They've been out to Walthamstow wetlands to work on the environment. So we work with a lot of external partners. Headliners is another charity we work with. We work with SEN, and they develop their journalism skills. So this is, again, really important for a lot of our students because it gets them out of the classroom, it builds their confidence, it builds teamwork, they make friends with each other as well. So we think this is really important. Along with their vocational and English and maths, we think their personal social development is really, really important. We also are now looking to, after COVID, find meaningful work placements and work experience, and also volunteering opportunities. So this morning, 2 of our students went to Mimecast, which is a cybersecurity company in the city, and they're going to be there with our CEO and one of our other teachers as well. 2 students who've got high SEN needs are going to be working with BT, and they're going to be doing a live cast, and the 2 other students will be filming them as well. So these are really meaningful ones. And what we're trying to do next is not move away from have the work placements, but also try to see if we can find jobs for them as well, meaningful jobs, because that's what we find is really difficult. They leave us and there's nothing afterwards for them. So again, enrichment activities with external partners, we provide a safe and calm space. And one other thing we do is we support them after they leave us. So officially for 6 months after they leave us, we provide support with anything they need in terms of academic support or pastoral support. But this extends to another year sometimes, so we still have students a year later coming to us as well. Okay, Jonathan, I think the next slide. And that's it. Any comments and questions, please?
Hi, thank you so much, Imtiaz and Yvonne. That was really detailed and really interesting. I'm just very conscious of time, and I'm going to suggest that if there are questions, can they go into the chat? And hopefully at the end of the session, we'll have some time to come back and answer some of the questions there. And in the meantime, let's move on to Jo. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Morning, everyone. Great to be here. I'm very aware that we've all been sat down for quite a long time, so I'm all for multitasking. So if you want to do a little bit of chair yoga, a bit of a stretch, please feel free, because I know this is probably not good for our backs the way we're sat for such a long period of time. But what we thought we would do just to finish off for the fourth session this morning is actually talk a little bit about some of the national changes that are in the pipeline, so that we can try and put all that local support that has been really, really fascinating to hear about into that national context for us. Because helpfully, unhelpfully, two really big documents were published just before the Easter holidays. So just when you were probably hoping we've finally got to the end of term and we can relax, the DFE published the white paper, The Opportunity for All, which sets out the direction of travel for education in general. And then literally the next day, they published the green paper on SEND and alternative provision. So they are massive documents. We have produced some summaries of those two documents as well, which will circulate along with these slides. I would urge you at the very least to read the summaries. And if you have got a little bit of extra time, to read the entire documentation, because I think we are at a bit of a milestone in education. I think the papers, for those people who have managed to get through them all, it is recommending and proposing some significant changes, particularly in the field of SEND. And I think a lot of us are thinking, hallelujah, it's about time that we had some of those changes coming through. So because the focus today has been on SEND, we're going to focus a bit more on the green paper, and we'll get but I'll try to link the white paper as much as I can as we go through. So I've had a few questions about green paper, white paper, what's the difference? So just very quickly, the white paper, which is the Education Opportunity for All paper, that has pretty much got to the final stage now. So all that needs to happen with that white paper is to go through Parliament, and it will effectively become law. And we are expecting that to happen over the summer. The green paper, which is the SEND paper, is pretty much a proposal at this stage. So it's technically a consultation. So it has done an extensive review of SEND and alternative provision. And what this green paper outlines is what they found, and they found a lot, and what they are now recommending for change. So that's just to kind of explain those two sort of legal changes, differences for you. Next slide, please, Jonathan. So what is this green paper? What's it found? So those of you who have been around for a few years in the world of SEND will know that in 2014 we had the new Code of Practice, which was at that time a really significant milestone around changes in SEND. It was when we first moved to pupils and young people having an education health care plan. And there was that move towards trying to have a more localised support offer which connected education, health and social care. And even before the pandemic, there were lots and lots of concerns that that code of practice, although very well intentioned, was simply not working. And there was far too many inconsistencies at different local areas, and that was having a significant impact on children and young people's outcomes. It obviously got delayed by the pandemic significantly. We were expecting this review 2 years ago, and we've been waiting and waiting for it. As the review went through the process, they decided to bring alternative provision into the review. It was initially going to be just a SEND review. They realised that because alternative provision, and I think we all know this, has been supporting the SEND system for years and years, that actually it was really unhelpful to keep them separate. So they very quickly said, we're going to make this an alternative provision review as well. And there are some big changes that they are proposing around alternative provision as well, which I'll touch on later. So as I said, technically this is a proposal, the Green Paper, and there is a consultation period that's already started, and it ends on the 1st of July. Please do have a look through the paper. It gives some particularly structured questions which are quite helpful around just getting you to consider what this means for your setting. And there's about 21 different questions that it poses, and you can submit your own individual response, or you might want to do a school response. We're going to do one as Hackney Education, and they will look at that over the summer and then turn that Green Paper into a White Paper in the autumn term. Next slide, please. Okay, so what did they find? So their catchy strapline is right support, right place, right time. And actually that really does sum up the 3 key things that they found that were not working. And the first challenge that they found were, and you know, lots of our speakers have touched on this already this morning, the outcomes for children and young people with SEND and in AP are really, really poor. And a lot of that I know is to do with the national curriculum not being inclusive enough. But when you look at those outcomes, particularly the AP one at the bottom there, only 4.5% of pupils in alternative provision are getting that grade 4 and above in English and maths. So there is this real disproportionality of in outcomes that's taking place. So that was the first thing they found. Next slide, please. The second one, and I think we've all seen this in action, unfortunately, they found from talking to schools, parents, young people, all stakeholders, that basically trying to navigate the SEND system is just not positive at all. You know, I've put some of the words that are used consistently in the Green Paper about how people find the process, you know, complex, long, bureaucratic. It creates more barriers sometimes between local authorities and families, and schools and colleges are often the ones that are kind of caught in the middle of it all. And I think we have all seen that, and we have, you know, I know lots of you on the call, we've got some SENCOs on the call, you know, are probably still experiencing that at the moment, and it's horrible, and it doesn't actually achieve anything positive for the young person. And I always say to people in SEND, in the middle of all these really complex processes is a young person who needs help. And it's really important that, and I think it's really good that this Green Paper is recognising that we've got to kind of get back to the moral compass of all of this. And as we know, that process, with it being so complex, is leading to late intervention, then the low confidence from parents in particular, that the support's going to be put in place. And then schools are getting to things too late, not because of anything they've done wrong, just because the process is so long for them to get through. And then it means that the resource that is allocated is often too little too late. And so we get that vicious cycle. Next slide, please. And then the third challenge, despite an incredible amount of money being put into the SEND system, it is simply not, it's not been enough, and it's not delivering value for money. And as we know, lots and lots of local authorities are dealing with deficits, which is putting more pressure on the budgets that then get delegated out to schools. And you can see the actual national total deficit for SEND is over £1 billion. So a significant amount of money there. So quite a lot to address. Next slide, please, Jonathan. Okay, now there are lots and lots of proposals for change in the Green Paper. Because we are a group of educational practitioners, I've focused these slides on the proposals for change from an educational perspective. There are many others that link to health and social care, but these are the main proposals for change that are coming through. So as I said earlier, one of the things that they have concluded in the Green Paper is that move to a very localised system, although it was well-intentioned, has not worked. So we effectively now have got about 152 different versions of a SEND system taking place in the country, depending on which local authority or county you live in, which is not working, and it's making a complex system even more complex. So one of their proposals for change is that we are just going to have one national system and one national set of standards when it comes to SEND and alternative provision. So we are, almost effectively doing quite a big U-turn here. So we're going from local to a very national framework. One of the things which I'm sure will be welcomed by all the SENCOs I know is that we are going to move to one EHCP template, which I know will be music to a lot of people's ears. So at the moment, again, depending on which local authority you work in, you will have your own template for an education healthcare plan. And some of them are really good and are very concise, but some of them are very, very long. I think I've read one which was over 50 pages long, which was just impossible to navigate through. So we are going to move to one standardized template. It will be digital, so it will be in the cloud. So all those changes that are made will be easily tracked, which will be really helpful in terms of transition and pupil mobility. And there is no way of that ever getting lost in the system. So that is going to be a big, significant change. There's going to be the introduction of local SEND partnerships. So each local authority will produce its own, what they call inclusion plan, which will set out all the current provision that local authority is able to offer in terms of SEND and alternative provision. And parents then will have a very tailored menu to choose from. So rather than at the moment having a lot of parents have said that they have to navigate a very complex system, they're not really sure what's out there for them, this plan will tell them what is available to them. And it will be very bespoke depending on the needs of their child. Next slide, please. At the moment, if a parent is not happy with the EHCP process, so say it wants to take a local authority to tribunal to challenge why a plan wasn't given or challenge the support that's in place, they only have to be offered mediation. They don't actually have to go through it. This Green Paper is saying that parents have to go through that mediation process. And a lot of that, the thinking behind that is to make sure that there has been some attempt at resolution. So rather than going from a complaint to a tribunal, which again could take a very long time to resolve, there will be a mediation process that the local authority will help facilitate. One of the things that the Green Paper is trying to do is align itself to a lot of the training that the White Paper is suggesting gets embedded even more. So in the White Paper, it talks a lot about the national professional qualifications that have been introduced this year, which I know all the feedback I've had has said that they've been really, really well resourced, really good, really accessible. So they want to align the current mandatory SENCO qualification to those new MPQs. And the proposal will be that they're going to introduce a new SENCO MPQ, which will replace the old accreditation for SENCOs. It will still be mandatory, so SENCOs will still have to have that qualification, and they will have 2 years to complete it. There's still a bit of woolliness about what does that mean for current SENCOs who are already qualified, and we've sort of reached out to the DfE to try and get a bit more clarity about that, whether there will be a process of SENCOs converting their current qualification, or whether they will have to do the MPQ from scratch. So once we know, we will obviously let you know as well. In terms of the mainstream provision, one of the things that it is recognising in the Green Paper is that schools need a lot more explicit support about how to support pupils, not just who have already got identified SEND, but how to assess pupils who might have SEND. So at the moment, each school has got its own graduated approach. It differs depending on what schools have got resource-wise. And again, that can lead to a lot of inconsistency. And a lot of schools are saying, and I think we've heard it a lot this morning, is that we need more advice, we need more support, we need almost to be walked through every stage of the process so we know what we're doing, that we're doing the right thing at the right time. So one of the things it will be introducing is almost a roadmap for every school to follow. So again, it will move to that national framework so that everybody is doing the same thing in terms of its assessment process for SEND. And in terms of alternative provision, again, the Green Paper recognises that it's been very difficult to quality assure the effectiveness of alternative provision. And again, to try and help that QA process, they are going to introduce a new performance framework for alternative provision. Again, the devil's in the detail, and we're not quite sure yet what that framework's going to look like, but they have said that they're going to very much focus on those standards for progress to try and raise that attainment that is lacking at the moment, and also focus on post-16 destinations and reintegration rates, so that hopefully pupils are not being referred to AP, never to ever return to mainstream, that there will be some clear standards, that the aim of alternative provision in lots of cases will be to support pupils and young people back into mainstream education. Next slide, please. So I'm going to sort of plough on because I'm very aware of time, and I'll take some questions at the end if we have got some time. I know Anya wanted me to just briefly mention a bit about preparation for adulthood, and this is one of the areas that Hackney is really prioritising over the next few years. It's been an area that I think we've felt that we needed to develop more, and I know Anya and Joe are leading on Project Hackney, which kind of links a lot to this. So this idea that we are not just preparing our young people for specific exams, it's about getting them ready for employment and for adulthood. Next slide, please. In terms of SEND, the DfE have produced quite a lot of documentation about the 4 key areas around preparing for adulthood. And again, I know lots of you on the call who are SENCOs will know that this forms a big part of those Year 11, Year 12 annual reviews, where you really look at each of those 4 areas and have those really helpful conversations so that you are really clear that they are going on to the right post-16 course and pathway that's not just about education, but it's about their independent living, their community inclusion, health and employment opportunities. Next slide, please. So Hackney has developed its own post-16 SEND strategy, which links to the overall post-16 strategy, which links to Project Hackney, and it's basically the Hackney Education's outline of how it's going to address some of the key issues that it's found, which is very much aligned to what the Green Paper has found. Next slide, please. I won't go through all the priorities because I'm very aware of time, but what I will do, Anya and Wendy, is I will send you the actual strategy document, which talks a little bit more about this in detail and brings it to life a little bit more, so that people can have this as a handout as well. But it's, you know, just to give you a little bit of a flavour of what's already been achieved, we've now got about 45 young people on supported internships in the borough, which is fantastic to see, and that's you know, a really good example of how Hackney is now moving towards those young people being supported into work experience placements that's appropriate for them. So lots of our young people who have got plans are working for different organisations around Hackney. So we're keeping it local so that they get that experience that they need to prepare them for that next stage. I think the next slide, Jonathan, is just the last two priorities. So I think what I will do, because I'm very aware we are nearly out of time, that we'll kind of wrap it up there, but I'm happy to take any quick questions if any of you got there. And I know that was a whistle-stop tour, but I hope that's just given you a bit of a flavour of things. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo. That was really
Thank
useful.
you.
Are there any questions out there?
No. I know we had an AOB from Jo Margery, if you are there.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight a CPD we're running for schools that are a member of the Careers Collaborative, which is most mainstream secondary schools in Hackney, which sort of follows on from this really quite nicely. So it's about delivering a whole school careers programme aligned to the Gatsby benchmarks, meeting the needs of SEND students. So we're hopeful we'll get Talentino there and examples from schools and colleges, but it'll be at B6 on hopefully the 14th of June. So if anybody hasn't heard of this and is interested, they can email me. I'll have a normal Hackney council email, or go to Anya, she can pass the information on, but we will be circulating information on this shortly, just to flag it up. It'll be an in-person event at B6 as well, which will be nice.
Thank you, Jo.
Also, Jo Tupman, I want to talk to you about input into it as well.
So what we will do, because of time, we will share all the speakers' email addresses, and just want to thank every single speaker that we've had today. It's been really engaging, really powerful. I think everybody here is left with some great takeaways that we can move forward on in terms of embedding these strategies or sharing the information that we have learned. So it has been recorded today, so we can also share the recording. So if you did miss any bit, or if you do want to refer anybody to anything that has been discussed, this will be shared. And just a big thank you once again to everybody that has spoken today, and for everyone that's taken their time out to join us. Hand over to Wendy,
who is just going to echo everything that Anya just said. Just huge thanks to everyone. And we are just about to finish on time. I think we're 1 minute over, which is amazing. Please do, if you do have questions, forward them to us, and we will make sure that the speakers get to hear about them, and hopefully you'll get a response. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoy your day.